Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Samantha.
I'm Thomas.
And this is Trans IRL.
We have a great show for you tonight. We'll be talking about transgender fertility and the things that make the process of starting a family before and during transition unique. We're broadcasting live on YouTube and Facebook tonight, so if you have any questions you'd like to ask, leave them in the chat and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the show.
Before we get into tonight's topic, we want to talk about something that happened in the news last week. On Friday, the Pentagon's controversial new policy banning transgender individuals from serving in the military went into effect. Those wishing to join the military who have been diagnosed with gender dysphoria will now be disqualified. That is, unless they present as the sex they were assigned at birth and meet all applicable regulations and standards of their biological sex.
It's unclear what would happen to the estimated 15,500 transgender service members already enlisted. An official from the Department of Defense says they'll be, quote, grandfathered in, but others worry that they could eventually be discharged because they're transgender.
The president first announced his intention to ban transgender individuals from serving in the military via Twitter in July of 2017. He cited tremendous medical costs and disruptions. All 4 service chiefs and 41 retired generals have empathetically disputed that. We spoke with Zane Alvarez, who was a guest on the show in January, and he told us how the ban is detrimental to the U.S. Armed Forces.
It takes away, essentially, a category of people that are open, willing, and able to serve, and you're telling them that they can't, even though they're willing and they're able. It's an all-volunteer force.
Zane called it disheartening to see the ban going into effect, but added that it only makes him want to serve more in spite of it. He says he's proud to serve in the military and will continue to fight for his right to do so. So we just wanted to touch on that topic for you all tonight and make you aware of it if you weren't already. And with that, we're going to jump in to tonight's show. And tonight's guest is a transgender advocate, husband, and father of 3.
Yeah, Trystan Reese is someone who travels the country as a speaker and teacher, providing training on LGBTQ parenting and pregnancy topics in which he holds personal experience.
When it comes to queer parenting and trans fertility, there are often many roadblocks to starting a family. The process can often be devoid of good resources, mysterious, complicated, and expensive.
Through his work, Trystan confronts these uncertainties and works to demystify queer parenting and trans pregnancy. So with that, we are excited to welcome Trystan to the show. Hi, Trystan, and we're glad to have you with us here tonight.
Of course, thanks for having me on.
Trystan, it's so great to see you. You and I actually had a chance to meet a few weeks ago in San Francisco. There are lovely faces. It was so fun to chat with you. So do you want to start us off tonight just by introducing yourself a little for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Trystan Reese. I'm a transgender man, and so what that means was I was assigned female at birth. I went through sort of like a traditional girlhood, I guess you could say, loving family, all of that. And then I became aware that I was transgender at some point in my adolescence, and I transitioned using hormones around age 20 or 22. And at the time I was told that my transition would basically take away all opportunity for me to have a child in the future. And I accepted that as the sort of price of admission of transition. I was 20 and I was like, whatever, dude, give me that testosterone. And so I really, becoming a parent didn't even occur to me until many years later when I met the man that I would eventually marry. And he and I became parents overnight to his biological niece and nephew. So we became adoptive parents. And then after adoption went through 4 years later, we decided to pursue growing our family. And we decided to pursue growing our family by me getting pregnant and carrying the pregnancy myself. So you can see me 8 months along with my little chubby cheeks. We told our story publicly. And we did so, we went through the whole pregnancy under the supervision of medical professionals, and there's actually quite a bit of data out there on trans fertility. And then there's a lot that we just don't know. And so I'm happy to share with you what we do know, what we don't know, what I hear now. I'm connected to a network of hundreds and sometimes thousands of transgender people around the world who built their families biologically. So yeah, and then professionally, I'm the director of family formation at Family Equality Council, and we're the leading nonprofit dedicated to helping LGBTQ plus people form families. So yeah, and supporting families that already exist. So I get to do this work for a living, talk about trans parents and queer babies and all those things, and it's my dream job.
That is so great. And so let's just jump into your dream job, the work that you do. We'll talk about a lot of things tonight, but why don't you tell us a little bit about the trainings, the workshops, what kind of topics do you cover? What do the structures look like for these events?
Yeah, I mean, I cover the whole depth and breadth of the LGBTQ plus community. And so I do a lot of trans fertility work, and then I do a lot of broader, more inclusive work. And so I have a whole online training program for providers, for family building providers. So like fertility doctors, midwives, doulas, surrogacy agencies, pretty much anyone that deals with LGBTQ plus people having babies. That's what this program is designed for, because we really found from our community that we spend a lot of time just like educating our providers on really basic things, which is not our job, number one. And then number two, can actually be pretty traumatic to have to go through that process and build trust with someone who doesn't know the very basic things about our health. So we thought we would take that onus off of our community and put it onto ourselves as a nonprofit serving the community. And so right now I have 3 modules built. 2 of them are live. 1 is still in beta. And the first one is just LGBTQ plus 101, getting that foundation language, understanding all the different identities, how to use a gender neutral pronoun, all those things that we want our providers to do. And then the second one is all about trans fertility, the effects of hormones on fertility, the effects of surgical transition on fertility. What does it mean to be a non-binary person going through some kind of a fertility process? All of that. Yeah, so that's a little bit about my work. And then I do a lot of in-person training as well. Mostly I do educational panels for the community, for LGBTQ plus people. How to figure out a way to piece your family together when sometimes you don't have all the necessary equipment or pieces that you need to be able to make that happen. So yeah, I get to do amazing work, I think.
That's awesome. And you really do put yourself out there. Your online presence is amazing. Your story that you've chronicled there, I've really enjoyed seeing what you've done on your Instagram page. And what I'm wondering is how you balance all of this, right? You're out, you're an active educator, you're a social media influencer. How do you maintain those boundaries between yourself and your family and the work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really lucky that I now have a job that's pretty much right in alignment with my passion. It was even harder when I was trying to juggle something completely unrelated and do this on the side. To be able to have this be the focus, that's already like a streamlining of the different parts of my life. But I think, when it comes to the kids, the 2 older kids are old enough now that they're able to 100% give their consent to be included in things or not. And so I really like empowering them to be a part of it. And the rest of it is just really hard. Like, I'm a workhorse. I travel a lot. I work till late at night. I'm not up early in the morning. I was going to lie to make myself sound better than I actually am. I do not wake up early. But we both really pitch in. My partner works his ass off to keep everything running in our home. So yeah, it's just a lot of hard work. It's a lot of asking for help. And just staying focused on the mission. And, I think for me, the most powerful stories I hear are actually when I'm at conferences and transgender women. A lot of transgender women come up to me and say, it had never occurred to them that they could have a family, and now they've transitioned beyond being able to do that. And so for me, that's the thing where when I feel like tired or run down, or wouldn't it be nice to have a weekend off, I just think about how much I love our trans community and how much I want us to have all the things, including the ability to build our own like tiny fortresses of love, which is, I think, what a family actually is. So that's the thing that just sort of keeps me going.
Definitely. And I know in my case, I had children before I transitioned. So for me, fertility was less of a concern with the time that I transitioned in my life. But it is a huge concern for everyone in the community, right? It's trans men, it's trans women, it's people who are non-binary. We all, have interest in families. And I think we all face individual issues, right? It's different issues on both sides of the equation there, but it's important to talk through so that people do understand their options and do understand what is available to them in the future if they do decide to go forward with having a family. I am curious, though, how you go about deciding, what you do share and you don't share with your little ones, because that's something that I'm always very concerned about with my social media presence in, making sure that, I'm telling my story, but at the same time, I'm also protecting my family.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I feel like it's not dissimilar from sharing, some of the harder parts of my own life. I try to really use good judgment. I try to only post things that my kids will look back on and feel proud. If I post about a struggle they're having, I really try to emphasize their resilience, their strength, their power. I always try to focus on sort of like how I could have done better or different, so I'm calling myself out and trying to point out my own learning as a parent, as opposed to saying like, my daughter did something really obnoxious today, or I don't know, whatever. I really try to focus on the positive for them. And I share a little bit of their story in a way that I hope is both empowering for them and also that they won't mind other people will have seen. And LGBTQ plus people, we become parents in all kinds of ways. And a lot of us, we are much more likely to be willing to foster and adopt kids than our heterosexual counterparts. And I think a lot of our adoption story is really, it's really useful for people to know who want to foster, who want to adopt. And so I hope by sharing their story that I demystify some of it to encourage more people to take that leap and to give some of the hundreds of thousands of young people in our country who need homes a place where they can really thrive.
That openness is so beautiful. I know I've personally learned so much from from what you share and the posts that you make and how open you are about just talking about your journey and what you all have been through as a family and how you've come together and grown together. And you mentioned the sort of the mystery of it all, like how it all comes to be. And I'm wondering, a lot of our viewers, and I know we'll get to some of it in the viewer questions, but there's a lot of myths and misconceptions surrounding trans fertility. And I'm wondering, are there any common ones that you experience and speak to regularly when it comes to fertility or trans pregnancy, or what's something that you want the audience to know, like your top myths?
Yeah. I get a lot of common questions, and I would say there's some through lines in the heterosexual cisgender ones, and then there are some through lines from the trans community. And even though I know that your audience is mostly trans, I will just touch on the most common myths from the sort of more whatever cisgender audience. I did a lot of studying on transphobia. That's kind of my background is doing persuasion work on transgender issues, changing people's minds. And so I think that's really how I came to telling our story publicly, was I wanted to figure out, okay, what are those myths so I can proactively address them in every single interview I did. If you read an interview with me or you see a television thing or whatever, it may look like I'm speaking off the cuff. I'm not. I always had here are my talking points, and you have to hit every single one of them. And so I think the first one and the biggest one is that we know a lot about trans pregnancy. And I think the biggest myth is this is some kind of experiment, or we're taking a risk with ourselves or with our pregnancies or our unborn children. That's not true. There is rigorous medical research, academically studied, peer-reviewed studies on trans fertility, on fertility preservation, on trans pregnancies, all of those things. And so there are some things we don't know, but there's a lot we do know. And we know a lot about trans pregnancy. And what we know is that if you stop taking your hormones before and wait for your cycle to come back, you are going to have a pretty typical pregnancy. You're just as likely to have PCOS or gestational diabetes, whatever, but your pregnancy and birth and labor outcomes are going to be the same as anyone else. And so I think that's the biggest one is, that medically this is a safe, healthy, normal thing that someone can go through. So I think that's really the biggest one is like, is this safe or is this some kind of big experiment? It's totally safe. It's not an experiment. And we do have best practices around how to do it safely. So I think that's like the number one biggest myth. And then, from the community, people are still hearing from their doctors that, hormones will permanently render them infertile. And in fact, when I started transitioning 16 years ago, my doctor, I did have to sign a thing saying testosterone will make me infertile. And I remember my doctor told me that testosterone would render my uterus an uninhabitable environment. That was a long time ago. That was 16 years ago. I still remember those exact words, just because it's like so stark. Like there's some kind of there's like the Gobi Desert, like in my stomach. I don't know. And so I think that's the other thing is just there's a ton of misinformation and mythology around the effects of hormones on fertility, both ways. And, just like what we know is that testosterone it temporarily affects fertility in some complicated ways, but broadly speaking, when used correctly, testosterone should stop ovulation. And then when you stop it, ovulation should return and you should be able to get pregnant. And from there, like everything else is pretty straightforward. But the opposite is true for estrogen, which is that we basically know nothing about exactly how estrogen affects fertility. We know that it has, the fancy word is it's a dose-dependent fertility suppressant. So basically, if you take enough, you'll stop producing the stuff that you need to make a baby. But what's really complicated is that it's actually different for every single person. So some people will be on estrogen for 10 years, they'll stop it, and then they'll regain all of their sperm production and they can contribute to a pregnancy. Other people will be on estrogen for as little as 1 month and never regain sperm production. And so that's the other myth is sometimes people are like, oh, well, you can just go off your estrogen and then you can, then you'll regain your, not always true. So those are the two biggest myths are that testosterone renders you infertile permanently, which is not true. And the other one is that estrogen has only temporary impacts on fertility, which is also unfortunately not true.
Yeah, a lot of good information there. So my wife and I, we have a big, queer family over here. You have a big family over there. We get all sorts of random questions all the time about, well, okay, so whose kids are they? Right? And things like that. And of course, our 4 kids are all biologically both of ours. And these are some of the experiences we have to go through as trans parents, are sort of dealing with people who are coming at us with a very heteronormative, cisnormative way of looking at childbirth. So what I'm curious about is during your pregnancy, what type of responses did you get from people? And did you find yourself often having to explain the situation?
Yeah, that's one of the benefits of just like going on television. I've never had to explain anything because literally everyone could just like, we were on the news here in Portland globally, yes, but like, especially here in Portland, there was like pretty solid saturation of our story. So that was one thing that was great. I didn't have to keep explaining it. And sometimes like a neighbor would come over, with like a present for us, like a baby present. And they'd be like, why didn't you tell us that you were pregnant? They saw it on the news or on Facebook or whatever. And I was like, well, I'm not going to go, door to door and tell everyone I'm a pregnant man. But in some way I kind of did that by telling our story publicly. And so I think about the sort of levels of acceptance, like in 3 ways. One is our immediate family, my parents, my partner Biff's parents, even like the school community a little bit, because that's so tied to our life. And then that was really lovely. That's my baby Leo and my mom that they're showing there. And, my dad in particular was really gung-ho about the pregnancy. He's a physician and he just wanted to come down and visit and then like touch my belly and be like, oh, that's an elbow or whatever. Cause he's a doctor. And he wanted me to send him every prenatal visit I had. He's like, will you send me those numbers? And he would look, analyze it and be like, I'm worried about this, or you're looking good here, whatever. So we had a lot of support in our immediate family, and then the broader Portland community. I just can't think of a better place for us to have been doing this. There were even times when we would go to, I remember like Pride Week. I went out with my sister and her daughter. We were like getting coffee at a coffee shop, and I was, pregnant, and the like barista was like, "Oh man, I saw your story. That's awesome. I'm going to buy you guys all coffee. Congratulations." People were really, really rad. And it was really the like larger anonymous internet world where things got really, really horrific. I just live in a world of rainbows and unicorns, and I thought people were going to think this is awesome. Like your kids are biologically related to both of you. That's so rad. They say 2 women can't make a baby. You guys like really stuck it to them. And I thought people were going to think that was cool that we did too, No, people are very attached to the idea that women do certain things, men do certain things, and never the twain shall meet. So I had a real wake-up call about transphobia throughout the process, and it was extraordinarily difficult for me to go through.
Yeah, the internet's always sort of a you never know where your story is going to end up on there, unfortunately. And I've definitely had some of my stories get out there and into the depths, and yeah, there's a lot of negative people, people who want to come down on you or your story or your family or your choices. But I think the thing that lifts me up are the people out there that are in the same situation that I'm in, right? I'm not the only person who's been through this. Trystan, you're not the only person who's been, through pregnancy as a man. And there's other people who are still considering it. So for every negative comment, they mean so little to me. But the ones that stand out are the people that are actually looking at our stories, drawing inspiration from our stories, and able to move forward with their own lives because we are helping them understand what is possible in their own journeys.
Yeah, it's just hard to let the good stuff in and keep the bad stuff out. And I'm a very tender, I'm very sensitive, and it's really hard to be receiving death threats and things like that, and people telling me how disgusting I am. It was more difficult than I would have expected. I thought that I was like, I've been trans a long time. I'm like an old man in trans land. But it turns out that you could live an entire lifetime being trans and like never get used to transphobia.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, not to dig into the struggle of it all, and I don't want to put you on the spot or make you talk about anything that you don't want to talk about, but I mean, when I think about my future as a potential parent and the possibility of being pregnant, I think a lot about my body, and a lot of things that we go through in terms of transitioning are so centered around our bodies for very many good reasons. And many of us struggle with dysphoria every day. And I'm wondering how pregnancy played into dysphoria land. What was that like for you before, during, after? I mean, you can feel free to say and not say whatever you'd like, but I'm wondering how that was.
Yeah, and there's actually data on this. So there's a study basically on the resilience strategies of transgender and non-binary people who've been through a pregnancy. And, we see that people generally choose like one of 3 routes. One, they try to live stealth as a cisgender man and then just kind of hide away a little bit towards the end of their pregnancy. And that's great because it's really good for their safety. It's not great because psychologically it's really hard to not have access to supportive systems while you're pregnant. It's a big experience that you're having. And so when you don't have access to support because you're not going out in the world and sharing with other people, that's really challenging. About a third of the people who go through the experience, many of them who are non-binary or have not transitioned hormonally, they actually end up living at least part of their pregnancy stealth as a cisgender woman. They just kind of choose to put their identity on the back burner so that they can go through this. And that too is safer. And then they do have access to support systems around their pregnancy. But what they don't have is support around their identities, right? So there's like this sort of three competing things. There's safety, there's support around pregnancy, and then there's support around your identity. And then another third are like me and choose to just live out and openly as a pregnant man. And then you have access to support around your identity, support around your pregnancy, but like not safety. So there's no one perfect way to do it, but everyone finds their own sort of way of managing it. And I think the way that you manage it externally really impacts the way that you're feeling about it personally. Some transgender men report that actually pregnancy helps lessen dysphoria because they feel like, okay, I have this body anyway. Like, at least now I'm doing something useful with it. Like, if I'm going to have a uterus, might as well make a person with it. So there is something that I found to be true, which is some kind of like, I think, radical acceptance of a body that maybe you've had a really complicated relationship with before. And for me, that was a huge thing when I actually was pregnant. I was like, oh, I don't have to pretend to be cisgender anymore. And I feel like there's a lot of acceptance that's sort of predicated upon, as long as you never remind me that you're transgender, I will accept you. And in a way, it was cool to be free of that, to be like, no, you know what? I don't want to be like a cisgender man. I am not a cisgender man. There's a lot that they can do that I can't, but like one thing I can do that they can't is to have a baby. And so it was a way of like embracing the thing that makes me different that I've always kind of had shame around. And the data shows us that that's true for, you know, a good portion of people. They actually are able to go through it and just like geek out on how cool it is science-wise. That's me, I'm a nerd. And so I was just like, this is so cool. Like, you know, the fetus is getting fingerprints this week, or it can hear noises in there that it will remember when it's born. I'll just like the cool science stuff. But other people find that it is a really, really difficult experience. You know, watching your body grow and change in ways that you wish it wouldn't, or that you associate with femininity, that's hard. And we hear the same thing from transgender women, post-transition, you know, or people who identify as women and then are somehow contributing to a pregnancy. It can feel really dysphoric to be like using your genitalia in that way that maybe you associate with masculinity. So we see it across the board. It's hard, and there are ways to survive it, and getting support from your community online or in person is like a really critical way that you can deal with dysphoria. And like, not everyone can do it, and not everyone should. That's why my story went big. I had one, largely speaking, the trans community was super supportive. I was surprised at how supportive everyone was. One person was like, basically, how dare you tell your story publicly? You should have just done it in private, because now people are going to think that I want to have a baby. And I was like, bro, the reason my story is public is because most transgender men do not want to do this. This is a unique experience. So I don't think anyone is going to extrapolate from my experience and think that now every trans guy wants to do that. So, yeah.
That's so beautiful. I mean, what you were saying about it being almost like a superpower, like, you know, I have this body, and to be able to use it in that way. I mean, for me, I just was sitting here and that was really resonating. And I know that that doesn't resonate with everyone, and not everybody sees their bodies in that way. But I think it's really important to be able to discuss that uniqueness and that in a positive light, and understanding that many transgender people don't want to be seen as cisgender, and we aren't. And to be able to embrace that very physically through the act of giving birth and becoming pregnant, I think is a tremendously beautiful thing. Like, I'm just like blown away right now. I'm like, wow.
Well, I'm really lucky too that I have dozens of close friends who've gone through this process. So for me, long before I ever got pregnant, men having babies was always a thing. It's been, I mean, my friend who is the first pregnant man that I know of, you know, his son turns 21 this year. So like, for my entire trans life, I've known transgender men who've had babies. So being pregnant, giving birth, yeah, 99.99% of people who do that are women. And like, occasionally a man does it. So I think that's how I was able to hack dysphoria too. Because I'm like, no, dude, like Liam did this, Steven did this. I'm like, you know, lots of dudes do this. That helped me, I think.
So when we're talking about the community in general here, do you have any advice for trans or non-binary or gender non-conforming individuals who are looking to expand their families?
my gosh, advice. That makes it sound
I
like
know
I
it's
know
a really
something.
it's a really wide question.
I mean, I think, I don't know. Let me talk this out, see if it makes sense. I think the first bit of advice that I try to encourage people to think about, especially if they're in the beginning of their transition or if they're a little bit younger, I really advise people to think like, to just embrace the fact that you have no idea what your future holds. I was like 100% sure that no one would ever love me. I was not worthy of being loved. Having a family, I mean, like, I couldn't even conceive of that. I thought I could transition and live my authentic life and be happy, or I could like get married and have a family. And so I think, really trying to imagine that whatever you could possibly imagine for your life is possible. And that comes into play a lot with fertility preservation, with people really trying to capture a tiny bit of their, fertility possibility before they transition. And then for people who want to build their families, I guess I do have advice because I am an adoptive parent and I'm a biological parent. And that is, I think hold tightly to your vision for the family you want to create and hold lightly to how you get there. Because there's so much mystery around pregnancy and childbirth. And again, there are so many ways to become a parent. You can be a temporary parent, and like, that's no less valid than people who parent kids forever. You can be an adoptive parent. You can be a co-parent with a friend. You can live in a house and like be part of a parenting community with other people. You can give birth. There's just like so many ways to make it happen. And I see a lot of people get stuck on like one way. They have one vision, and then when it doesn't become a reality, feel really shattered. And so I think holding lightly to the many ways that kids can come into your life, I guess would be the piece of advice that I have.
And that's an awesome piece of advice. So we do have some questions that were submitted by our viewers. So I did want to get over to those and answer as many of these as we could here tonight. So with our first question here, is egg harvesting expensive? And if you've already started testosterone, how long do you have to go off of it before the procedure?
Cool. Well, I feel like I want to first say, like, I'm totally not a doctor. However, if there is a study on trans fertility in the past like 20 years, anywhere over the world, I have probably read it. So I'm going to give you the best information that I have. And also, I'm not a doctor. So yes, egg harvesting is usually not covered by insurance. It's something that we want to work on actually as part of our policy moving forward. Our policy team's work moving forward is to think about how we can change that. But usually egg harvesting, yes, you have to pay out of pocket, which sucks. I would say it is relatively expensive, like in the several $1,000s. More than that, though, the thing that usually is a sticking point for people is that the procedure could be considered invasive. You do it under twilight sedation, but they do have to go in there. So kind of like a super mega pap smear. And for a lot of transgender men, non-binary people who are assigned female at birth, that can feel really disconcerting. Again, it is done under twilight sedation. It is a pretty simple procedure. But the other thing they don't usually tell you is that you usually don't get enough eggs the first time around. So sometimes you actually have to go through the entire cycle 3 or even 4 times, because it's going to take a certain number of eggs on average to result in a successful pregnancy down the road, either through yourself or if you want to use a surrogate, whatever. So those are the I guess like the drawbacks of that particular procedure. But the other parts of it are really straightforward. You do have to stop your testosterone until your cycle resumes, which usually happens within 3 to 6 months. 100% of transgender men who got pregnant resume their cycle within 6 months of stopping their testosterone. So if your cycle hasn't come back by then, go see a fertility specialist. And that kind of thing, a fertility like an intake process and evaluation, that's usually covered under preventative care by insurance if you have insurance. So that is usually free or $40 copay or whatever, to go and have someone just like do an ultrasound, take your blood, check your levels. There are lots of ways that we can tell what's going on with your eggs just based on some ways, some stuff that's going on in your follicles and all that stuff. So yeah, 3 to 6 months you have to be off of testosterone. You have to take a little bit of estrogen through a subcutaneous shots to stimulate egg production. I haven't heard of anyone having a problem with that. It's relatively painless, and you only have to be on that cycle for like 12 days usually. And nothing like your beard doesn't fall out. It doesn't make your voice get higher, nothing like that. You probably won't even notice. It just sends a little signal to your pituitary gland to talk to your ovaries and be like, spit out some more eggs. So that's not the scientific term, but that's just the way I imagine it happens. Does that make
I'm pretty
sense?
sure that's exactly how it happens. Yeah.
Well, one cool thing that, I would say an increasing number of transgender men and non-binary people who are assigned female at birth are doing is going through an egg harvesting process. And if their partner has a uterus, their partner can carry it. If their partner is female identified and was assigned female at birth. So it's a way that you can be, you're genetically linked to the child, but you don't actually have to go through the pregnancy process. So a lot of, same-sex female partners do that. And I think that it's a really cool option if you can afford it. And if you're, you can handle being off your hormones and go through the harvesting procedure, if that's something you're willing to do. It's a cool solution. I mean, I'm just like, yay, science.
No, that's so great. Okay, so we have another question from the viewers. And I actually got this question. I've been asked this question before as well, but if you go off of testosterone to have a child post-top surgery, will that cause breast growth?
Yeah, and the answer is sometimes. So there's actually been 2 studies on transgender men and lactation specifically. And so from that research, we see that, if you can imagine, and I just had top surgery, so this feels very personal. But, when you have top surgery, the surgeon really goes in and tries to clear out all like what we would call breast tissue, but all the mammary glands. And they do their best. And also bodies are really resilient. So there are totally cases in which even if you've had top surgery, those mammary glands, the milk ducts, like find their way through and produce milk. So some transgender men, even if they've had top surgery, are able to produce some milk, which they can feed their babies with. You probably aren't going to be able to produce enough to feed them just yourself. That way, you're going to need to supplement in some other ways. And some people don't want to do that because of dysphoria. Totally fine. Other times, the milk duct will try to produce milk, but it's not connected to a milk duct. You know what I mean? It's not going to come out. And so some transgender men who've had top surgery do find that they have some like puckering that happens, like some little raised spots. Some of them go away. You just kind of put ice on them, the same as if you're trying to dry up your milk supply for any other reason. Other times they do have to have revisions. And we don't have enough data to know like 10% of transgender men who get pregnant need revisions if they, whatever. We don't know the exact numbers, but we do know that sometimes revision is necessary afterwards. And sometimes you're able to produce milk and sometimes none of it. And there's no connection between what kind of procedure you had and whether you're able to produce milk or you need to have a revision. Sometimes even if people have had their whole nipple taken off and then regrafted on, they will still produce milk through that nipple. Bodies are amazing.
All right. Our next question is more aligned towards people who were assigned male at birth. But is it too late to bank sperm if you've already started HRT?
Yeah, so this gets back to the question about the effects of HRT for trans women being very unpredictable is what I'll say. It's very unpredictable. So if someone has been on HRT, no matter how long they've been on it, if they have any inkling that maybe one day they might want to contribute to a pregnancy, if at all possible, psychologically, I think it's a really good idea. I urge people to stop taking their hormones, talk to their doctor and just say, I'd like to get my sperm checked. And it is super easy. In some cases, you can even actually do it through the mail for like, I think $70. They will like send you a kit, you produce a sample and it goes in this special ice pack, you ship it back to them and they'll analyze it. That's like the DIY way. I'd say like try to actually go and get it analyzed. That's another thing that's usually covered by insurance under preventative care is getting your sperm analyzed. If you can produce a sample psychologically, physically, and they can literally look at it in a microscope and see if you've got swimmers. And they're looking for like, does it have a good shape? Is it actually swimming? And are there enough of them? Those are the 3 things they're going to be looking for. And if all those things are good, then like you can produce a couple of samples literally over the course of a week and then be done. That is enough for like a lifetime's worth of future embryos. You'll never have to do it again. You go back on your estrogen. It's good for until you die, probably beyond when you die. Hundreds of years, basically, these samples are good for. And then just know that like there is a chance that it's just not going to be possible. And I think finding a way to make peace with that is everybody's own journey. And just remembering that, again, there are so many ways to be part of building a family. There's nothing magical about having a baby that's related to you. There's really not. I have kids that I did not give birth to. I have a kid that I gave birth to. I love them all the same. I love them in different ways, but when you like quantify it, totally the same. Love my adopted kids as much as if I birthed them. Love my baby as much as if I saved him from a really unfortunate situation. So, yeah. Does that make sense about the HRT question? It's unpredictable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely makes sense.
None. All we have is anecdotal evidence. So, yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's important the way that you spoke to that, and that it's got to be your choice and it's got to be what's right for you. And if you can psychologically handle that and go through that, and it's important to your vision, that you should try, and you should, if you can. I think that's super important.
Yeah, there's a great video series actually by Gigi Gorgeous, the like YouTube makeup artists. She went through this process. She and her partner tried to have a baby on their own. She went in and saw a fertility specialist, and they analyzed the sample and everything, and she just didn't have enough swimmers in there. And they were like, well, yeah, you can basically go on testosterone. We can try and do more. And she was like, you know what? We tried. We're going to become parents in a different way in the future. And so I think watching those videos and watching her process was really, really useful for me as a transgender man to understand more about what it's like from the other side.
So our next question is, can you still get pregnant while on testosterone?
Yeah, this is a super complicated question. I'll preface it by saying, I do not think that transgender people are stupid. And I feel like the way that we are often treated by our medical providers is as if we were stupid. And I feel like people often dumb down information because they don't trust us to make good decisions based on the information that's given. So I think, yes, it has been said that you cannot get pregnant while on testosterone. That's not true. But also now the pendulum has swung the other way, and people keep saying testosterone is not birth control. That's also not true. So a couple of things are really important to know. Number one, in your first year of taking testosterone, a research study came out of Israel last month that showed that you are still fertile in your first year of taking testosterone. So if you are having the type of intercourse that could result in a pregnancy and you've only been on T for a year, please use protection because you could still be fertile. The second piece is, again, fancy language, testosterone is a dose-dependent ovulation suppressant. Fancy words for if you're taking it in the right amount, it stops your ovulation and you cannot get pregnant. This is not an exact science, because what if you do your shot early and your body will overproduce estrogen to try and make up for that extra testosterone you've hit it with? You could ovulate. You take your dose late, you could ovulate. So if you are not religious about taking your testosterone in the way that your doctor has prescribed, you could still get pregnant. So that's like that's a very long version of that question. But I really want to be honest with people about all the different things that are at play. It really makes me mad when people say like, either that you can't get pregnant or that testosterone isn't birth control, because it totally is if you're taking it in the right amounts as your doctor is prescribing you. And we know the trans community is more likely to have insecurity around insurance, insecurity around finances. So sometimes there are very legitimate reasons. In addition to the fact that we're all just human and aren't perfect. So yeah, that's my super long story.
That's a good answer,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was good.
Okay.
So those were questions that were submitted through Instagram prior to tonight's episode. We've also had a couple of questions come in through our YouTube and Facebook live streams. So I did want to get to those here while we still have some time. And the first question was, for trans individuals who are considering going to fertility clinics, What are some good and bad things to be aware of or look out for in that type of environment?
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough question because I think we see a huge variety of approaches to trans fertility, depending on what clinic you go to. I'm really biased because I do this training. And so I feel like there are some excellent clinics where they have made the commitment unequivocally to be supportive of transgender people start to finish, whether you present or are perceived as the gender you identify as or not, wherever you are on your journey, whether you have no partner and you want to become an intentional solo parent, whether you have multiple partners because you're polyamorous, they're committed. But I also continue to hear stories from the trans community that, they've had a really hard time with discrimination, harassment, and at times refusal of care. So I would just say, when I was having my baby and I had Kaiser, I called them up and I was like, I am a pregnant man. I only want to see someone who is excited to treat a pregnant man. And I want you to get off the phone with me and talk to your staff and figure out who's going to be the right match for me. And the lady on the phone was like, oh no, everyone here is great. No one's going to have a problem with that. And I was like, okay, the way that you said that is already wrong. So I want you to get off the phone with me and I want you to talk to them. And I think that, really remembering that you are in charge of them. They serve you. You are their client. You are their customer. Treat them that way. Interview them as if you're interviewing someone for a job, because you are. So I think there are lots of fertility clinics. You have lots of options, even if it doesn't feel that way. Call them and say, this is who I am. This is what I'm looking for. Can you do that? And make it really clear what your expectations are. I mean, I go as far as to say, and I expect to be treated with respect by every person that I interact with. And I'm putting you in charge of making sure that happens. Can you do that? And I feel like people are always like, yeah, I'm on it. And I bring my own privileges as, someone who's perceived as a man, as someone who's white, as someone who I've had a lot of healing from my medical trauma. And so I don't have issues of PTSD that come up in medical situations the way that other transgender people do. So I think that's the other piece is, figure out, like, can you find a fertility doula? Can you find someone in your life to just be your support person and call the office on your behalf, go in with you and hold your hand and tell someone off behind the closed door, take care of whatever the problem is. So yeah, I think doing your homework ahead of time and then finding someone that will be supportive of you and be a good ally. And through the process, so much comes up around fertility, our bodies, family. I mean, all this stuff comes up, our sex lives, everything. So yeah, be prepared.
That's an awesome answer.
It's such great advice. Even outside of the fertility, I'm just I need to always talk to my doctors this way, all the time.
Right.
I'm also Canadian, and so I find a way to do it. I hope that feels very polite, but just very clear. So I definitely remember a time when I was pregnant, and you go in for prenatal visits, but they only do an ultrasound really once every 6 weeks if everything else is what they consider normal. But I was really paranoid. I was being subjected to a huge amount of harassment online, and I needed that reassurance that everything is okay. And so every time I went in for a prenatal visit, I was like, oh, when are we going to do the ultrasound? And then my certified nurse midwife would be like, oh, well, we weren't planning to do an ultrasound today. And I would just say, oh, I totally hear that this was not your plan, but I don't really see myself leaving your office today until I've seen the baby. So if it's a matter of timing, I can wait in the lobby for as long as you need. But I would like to see the baby today. I would like an ultrasound. And every time she was like, oh, yeah, we were not going to do that, but we can. And I'm like, that sounds great. Should I wait here or out there? And so I think just super polite, but very clear has always worked for me.
Can you come with me to all my...
The funny thing is today, what we want to do is take all of our provider trainings and actually turn around and then reproduce them with all the same information for the trans community itself. And today, when I was thinking about what that adjustment would look like, I was like, oh, we need to have a whole section on resiliency strategies and self-advocacy in medical systems. And my boss was like, yep,
Yeah, it's huge.
So yeah, it's coming. It's coming.
So we do have one more question from the live viewers, and this person wants to know, what were your experiences in bathrooms while visibly pregnant? Were men accepting, less accepting? What were you going into men's restrooms? What were you doing there?
Wow, that I've never gotten that question before, and it's a basic one, you'd think, but people want to know where did I find maternity clothes more than they want to know what bathrooms. I don't remember what I did. I think I just kept going in the men's room. What I found was that men don't give a shit like who is next to them in the bathroom. Men do not care. Why? Because of homophobia. It is gay to look at another man in the bathroom. It is the only time that homophobia has ever served trans people. Dudes do not look at other dudes. And so I think that I just used the men's room like everyone else and was like, I'm a pregnant man. I do remember one time before I got pregnant when we were trying to conceive that I was having a menstrual cycle, and like I definitely was in the men's room and then like left blood in the toilet, and the toilet would not flush. And I was like, this is horrible, because some man is going to come to this toilet and then it's full of blood. And what is he going to think happened to the poor man that was there before him? And so that was like, it was mortifying. But I think just generally men don't care. So I just kept using the men's room. Also here in Portland, there are a lot of gender neutral restrooms. Most bathrooms here are single stall gender neutral bathrooms, and that's a lifesaver.
Definitely. So we've run through all of our user questions there, viewer questions. So we answered some really good ones here. And I'm so glad we were able to hit you with a new one. You know, that's pretty rare when you're on the circuit, you're answering questions every day. So I don't know who submitted that one. I'll have to find out and give them extra credit for asking an original question. But thank you so much for sharing not only your story, but some of the work that you're doing out there and your advocacy work as well. I think it's so important. It's so important that as trans parents, we're sharing our stories. And I know it's helping so many other individuals as well. So thank you for doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. And hopefully next time I'm up in Portland, I'll get to see you. Or if you ever sneak down to Phoenix, I'll catch you over here. So.
No offense, but I probably won't be coming to Phoenix soon.
Ah, darn it.
Sorry. It's just not one of the places where they hire me to go.
All right. Well, I'll see you in Portland then, all right?
Anytime.
Okay. I'll come up that way. Let's real quick, let's talk about our guests next week, Thomas.
Yes, so next week on the show, we'll be talking about transgender representation in pop culture. And this is a topic I've wanted to address for a while, especially how representation has shifted and changed over the last 20 years. Yeah,
growing up as a closeted trans kid in the 90s was hard enough as it was, but media representation at that time was just terrible and made it that much harder. So our guest next week is going to be Neela Karasik, and it's going to be a great conversation. We're going to be looking at how culture has shifted in the last 20, 30 years in regard to trans representation and understanding. And that'll be coming up next Thursday, 7:30 p.m. Pacific, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, right here on Trans IRL on YouTube and Facebook.
And before we go, if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Trans IRL. All of our past episodes are available there. We're also on Facebook as Trans IRL Show and Instagram as Trans IRL. So please be sure to like us and follow us there.
All right, we've got Trystan back on here with us. Trystan, thank you so much. We got you yawning. Thank you so much for giving up some of your evening here and chatting with us. I think this has been a fantastic, important conversation. I know a lot of people are going to absolutely enjoy what we've covered here. So thank you very much for your time tonight.
Of course. Happy to be on. Thank you so much for having me. And folks can follow my family if they want to see baby pictures. I'm Biff and I on Instagram and Facebook.
Definitely. Please check out Trystan's Instagram page. Photos are amazing. He does a fantastic job of sharing stories there. I do quickly want to thank Addison in the Trans IRL control room for all of her work behind the scenes this week and every week. And with that, I'll say good night from all of us here. Bye, everyone.